over the last 20 years, BRICS, the group of emerging countries led by Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have been very polarizing. Some see the group as a legitimate force to continue creating their own lane in the global economy, while others aren't as convinced. But no matter how you slice it, you have to admit that they are remaining relevant and gaining momentum by staying true to their main objectives. So in this video, let's explore what their main objectives are, and more importantly, the 5 strategies that they use to stay relevant. The acronym BRIC was actually created by accident in 2001 by an economist who used it to describe fast-growing economies that he predicted would collectively dominate the global economy by 2050. The leaders of the initial 4 BRIC countries led by Brazil, Russia, India, and China met together in 2006 at a United Nations event which began a series of high-level meetings over the next couple of years, ultimately culminating in the first official BRIC summit in 2009. Their focus during and after that meeting was to improve the global economic system, reform financial institutions, and strive for a new world reserve currency, taking a direct shot at the dollar, which will be a recurring theme throughout this video. In 2010, South Africa joined the bloc with strong backing from China. Since then, the BRICS countries have received dozens of formal and informal applications from countries wanting to join BRICS. Many developing and emerging countries feel aligned with BRICS, and they too want to create a separated world economically, politically, away from the Western countries, specifically the United States. And while the BRICS countries have created more bilateral relationships with these countries all around the world, no new countries have been admitted since 2010, that is until recently. At the 15th annual BRIC Summit in 2023, they announced the invitation of 6 new countries to the bloc effective January 1st, 2024. Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Argentina and their new president, Javier Milei, have officially rejected the BRICS invitation, so instead let's focus on the other 5 countries and try and figure out the strategy that BRICS used for this expansion. When looking at these 5 new BRICS countries, I see 2 obvious things that they all have in common. The first, location, location, location. And by that, I mean it was very clear that BRICS intentionally wanted more of a regional balance within the bloc. With Brazil out in the middle of nowhere all by themselves, it seemed reasonable to invite another Latin American country. Obviously, that didn't work out. Then we look at South Africa, who has the weakest economy within BRICS and likely the least amount of global influence. So it made sense for Africa to gain 2 new entrants to the bloc. And with China and India being the largest economy in BRICS and 2 of the largest in the world, it made sense that no new countries were added from their specific region. The other factor to this location strategy is their actual physical location on a map and how BRICS can use this to their advantage. This is pretty crazy. Look where these 5 countries are located: Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, all in close proximity to each other, all of them except Ethiopia on the coast, making it easier for global trade, and one of them, Egypt, controlling one of the most important trade routes in the world, the Suez Canal. These waters will now be monitored by BRICS countries. Location seems important, but the next strategy feels way more important, and that is dominating the world's energy supply. With the additions of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iran, BRICS will now have 6 of the top 10 oil producers in the world. This is important because oil transactions for the longest time have been tied to the dollar. Back in the day, the United States and Saudi Arabia made a deal that the US would help protect Saudi Arabia and the region if Saudi Arabia agreed to only trade oil in the dollar, otherwise known as the petrodollar. This means that countries now needed to hold the dollar in order to make oil transactions and provide energy for their country, and this is known as the dollar wallet. But countries don't always use all the dollars in their dollar wallet. So instead of having their dollars just sit there, losing purchasing power to inflation over time, they would do the next best thing, which was to invest those dollars into the US stock market, making the United States an investing juggernaut. This was a vicious cycle for countries around the world who couldn't escape their need for the dollar no matter how hard they tried, but times are changing as these countries led by BRICS see an opportunity to collectively reduce their need of the dollar. As this starts to get more momentum and more countries start moving away from the dollar, this is going to put a tremendous amount of pressure on the petrodollar. But it's not only the oil transactions that are using less of the dollar, it's all transactions. There's a lot of fake news out there about a common BRICS currency or a BRICS currency backed by gold. Neither of these are true at the time of this recording, maybe one day, but not right now. I think it's because the BRICS countries realize these currencies have limited standalone value, limited interest, and underwhelming stability. But their goal of reducing the dollar in the day-to-day transactions still remains a top priority. So the next best way is to utilize their local currencies in place of the dollar, which had typically been used for these sorts of transactions as a settlement currency. Here are some, but not all of the examples where the dollar has been removed. Brazil and China had made an agreement to only use their own currencies for trade between the countries, ditching the dollar entirely. Russia, as their dollar assets have been frozen for their attack on Ukraine, they obviously have not been using the dollar for some time and have transitioned to mostly using the Chinese yuan. India has made a deal with the United Arab Emirates to pay for all oil transactions in either the Indian rupee or the UAE dirham, a transaction that used to occur in dollars. China's cross-border transactions used to be a majority in dollars, but recently that has changed to their own currency, the yuan. And finally, South Africa, one of the unofficial leaders of Africa, have seen the continent as a whole becoming more aligned. In 2018, 54 member states created the African Continental Free Trade Area, where the main goal was to reduce frictions trading goods and services within the continent. A main focus being traded in, local currencies, reducing the reliance of the dollar yet again. So yeah, there is some truth to the dollar being used less globally, but what if I told you that might not matter with certain developing technologies? The world is becoming more digitized, more convenient, with everything available to you at the tip of your fingers. BRICS is dipping their toes into this as well with their new digital blockchain payment system called BRICS Pay. But before we get into that, I make videos about world news impacting the dollar and the US economy, so if you like topics like this and want to see more of them, make sure to subscribe to the channel. BRICS Pay is a payment system specifically designed to simplify economic cooperation between the BRICS countries. BRICS Pay could make cross-border transactions much more convenient for those involved. However, there are some significant issues with this new system, but first let's stay positive and start with the good. Currently, most banking transactions run through SWIFT, which is the system how global banks communicate with each other. When you're sending money from one person to another, as long as the two banks have accounts with each other, they would authenticate the payment request. If the banks don't have a relationship, the SWIFT message would be sent through intermediary banks, which have a presence in, you guessed it, the United States, which is why these countries are looking for alternatives. BRICS Pay isn't necessarily going to replace SWIFT, but what it does is give these BRICS countries more autonomy from the Western system. The second possible benefit to BRICS Pay is they should simplify cross-border transactions by eliminating the need for an intermediary currency like the dollar, which will help reduce transaction costs. Here are some of the obvious roadblocks that BRICS is going to have to overcome in order for this to work, especially in the beginning. It's hard for 5 countries, now 10 countries, to come to a consensus when there are 10 different agendas and 10 different priorities. And with each country having their own regulations when it comes to financial systems and digital currencies, there could be challenges in creating unity with each other on the way to operate going forward. Additionally, BRICS Pay depends on the technological infrastructure of each of the BRICS countries, so disparities in technology adoption and connectivity may hinder its potential. This includes staying up to date with cybersecurity. But even as these technologies continue to develop, every powerful country or organization still needs a stable financial system. And this was actually one of the first major collaborations between the BRICS member countries. In 2015, they created their own central bank and in a way copied one of the most reliable forms of investments that exist today, which is bonds, otherwise known as treasuries or debt. Basically, bonds are how countries help fund their operations. Investors pay money up front with the promise of receiving their initial investment back plus interest at the end of the term. And the BRIC Central Bank, otherwise known as the New Development Bank, has been doing this since their inception almost a decade ago. But in their case, they have an asset pool mostly made up of dollars, which has led to bond offerings in dollars. So even though this group is trying to reduce their reliance on the dollar, they understand that investors still enjoy the convenience and stability of the dollar, which is still the world's reserve currency. And sure, they've had some bond offerings in the Chinese yuan, even the Russian ruble and South African rand. But recently they made a huge announcement about a first of its kind bond offering of $28 billion. This announcement helps tie everything together that we've talked about in this video so far, and it could be the one thing that BRICS needs to legitimize everything else that it's doing. So in order to get more information on the $28 billion and to keep the story going, make sure to check out this video here.